In another world, Rorschach is narrating over the city's filth. He is disgusted by the degeneracy and vice as the whole world stands on the brink of chaos, and politicians are useless. Police are investigating the murder of the comedian, who took quite a fall. It seems that someone broke in and beat him up. Police assume that this wasn't a normal burglary, and someone targeted him on purpose as he took the fall of his life. One detective still thinks that this is just a normal robbery, but his partner thinks there's more to it. Rorschach never stopped being a vigilante and openly kills. Meanwhile, Rorschach is looking into the murder on his own. He grapples up to the crime scene and starts climbing his way up. The scenery is out of this world, and he's up like Spider-Man. He takes a look around the apartment and spots a follow spot, revealing a secret costume and an old picture. We are taken back to an old memory. Hollis is talking to Dan, reminiscing about the good old times. The old night owl is talking to the new one. He leaves to go home when he hears sirens around. Looking around the city, it is filled with debauchery and sin. He crosses the street, and we find a newspaper showing the nuclear tension between the US and the Soviet Union. When he reaches his apartment, it's been broken into. As he carefully goes inside, he finds Rorschach treating himself to some food. The two are familiar, and Rorschach reveals to him that the comedian is dead. Dan takes him down to the workshop to discuss this, and it appears that the old gang has been retired. Dan asks if it was just an ordinary burglary, but Rorschach thinks that it's ridiculous. Rorschach thinks that someone is picking off costumed heroes and suggests it might be Hollis. Rorschach decides to leave and drops Dan a remark that he quit, and it gets Dan thinking about the past. Years ago, people were rioting against costumed heroes, demanding they leave and get replaced by cops. The comedian responds with violence as Dan tries to calm down the situation. He keeps acting like a menace, making Dan rethink everything he believes, but the comedian doesn't stop. Dan snaps out of the flashback and seems to be distraught. Later on, Rorschach documents his life before heading out into the streets to find out about the murder. He enters a bar and catches everyone's eye, with tensions running high. He attacks a random guy and then hears someone making fun of him, so he breaks his finger, asking who killed the comedian. When no one answers, he breaks them all. After that, he leaves the degenerates and goes to visit Adrian Veidt, better known as Ozymandias. Ozymandias suggests it was the Soviets, but Rorschach believes it was a mass killer. He defends the comedian and says that he stood up for his country and didn't settle down for what was happening today. Ozymandias admits that he was never friends with Rorschach, but stresses that he went public way before the official act, but Rorschach doesn't care. Ozymandias recalls being part of the Crime Busters, a team of masked vigilantes. Dr. Manhattan has his eyes on Silk Spectre, and comedian makes fun of an old guy for trying to remain in the group. Ozymandias suggests that they need a proper leader, but comedian doesn't like what he hears and begins beefing with him. The tension in this room is high, as the comedian tells them that the world is going to be destroyed by nukes in 30 years and storms out. They all leave the meeting, and Ozymandias gets the idea of having to save the world. As the doomsday clock is nearing midnight, we go back to the present day. Rorschach breaks into a government facility while insulting the remaining members of the old squad while thinking about the ones who died. He visits Dr. Manhattan to warn him that someone is trying to murder him. He finds Silk Spectre, named Jupiter, and warns them that the comedian is dead, but Dr. Manhattan doesn't seem to care. Jupiter never liked him because he tried to force himself on her mother. Jupiter finally has enough of Rorschach and Dr. Manhattan forces him out of the place, while Rorschach is still trying to warn them. Dr. Manhattan seems to be Jupiter's toy as he tends to her every need. Jupiter tries to make him jealous by going out with another guy, but he doesn't care. Dr. Manhattan then has flashbacks of his past and how he intervened in the Vietnam War. He was deployed alongside the comedian, who was just immoral. Later, comedian is at a bar celebrating the victory, but he's sad that nothing makes sense, and everything to him is a joke. He wants to leave out of this place when a pregnant lady tries talking to him. It seems he got her pregnant, and she doesn't let it go, smashing a bottle in his face. The comedian shoots her in the face, all while Dr. Manhattan watches and lets it happen because he doesn't care about anything. The comedian knows he doesn't care about human beings and leaves with a remark that he's going to forget Jupiter. Back to the future, Jupiter calls Dan to go on a date, and he gives her the attention she wants. Rorschach is still investigating, upset with the fact that no one cares the comedian is dead but him. He questions his beliefs, but remains true to himself. Evil must be punished, and he will not compromise. Jupiter got a date out of Dan. The poor man treats her well, and she's using him. She explains that she's 35 and believes that she wasted her life away. She loves the fact that vigilantes were outlawed and reminds Dan of an old story to get his mind off everything. They continue laughing and having a good time. Poor man is getting played. Jupiter's mom is visited by her daughter as the rest of the team attends the comedian's grave. Jupiter didn't feel like going, so Manhattan transported her to California. Her mom isn't affected by what the comedian did to her somehow and says that there are now only 3 members left alive in the old team. She has some pervy posters of herself before remembering her old team in the past. They were taking pictures, and the comedian was overly nice at the time. She leaves them to change her clothes, and once she's alone, the comedian goes after her. He makes a move on her, but she doesn't like it. He doesn't take no for an answer as she attacks him, and he beats her up for it. He's suddenly dragged off by another hero who beats him up for what he tried to do, but he vows to get his payback. Back at the funeral, everyone pays their respects, and Dan leaves the comedian's token just before a mystery man leaves his flowers and leaves the funeral. As he walks through the streets, another paper warns of the tension between the 2 countries. The man goes home and opens the fridge to find Rorschach. Rorschach names him Moloch and breaks his arm. The man says he's not Moloch anymore. Rorschach keeps questioning him, and he reveals that the comedian visited him 2 weeks ago. The comedian was drunk by his bed and rambling on. He talks about an island where something big is happening, and he wishes he'd never seen it. He admits that he's done horrible things before, but they're nothing like the island. He asks the Lord for forgiveness before going crazy and leaving. Rorschach finds meds, and Moloch reveals he has cancer, and he has no hope. Moloch is off the hook in Rorschach's book. For now. Later, Rorschach hits the cemetery. He thinks about Moloch's story and doesn't know what is true and what's not. He thinks that comedian saw things for what it is. He was the only one who saw the joke, and that's why he was lonely. Rorschach then recalls an old joke that makes him chuckle. Suddenly, the movie turns into some kind of comic before we watch society and the impending nuclear war. A little kid is reading a comic that we are watching with him, but he can't focus because of a ranting conspiracy theorist. Suddenly, a man holding a sign picks up the papers before we go back to the comic. The comic is about a pirate and a shipwreck. We're then taken to Jupiter, who belongs to the streets. Not only is she sleeping with one Dr. Manhattan, but like 50 of him.
He cold. She belongs to the streets.
She realizes that there are multiple men and storms out. He tries to explain that he was trying to please her, but she overreacted before finding another version of him working. She gets upset that he's not giving her the attention she needs and storms out, but he ain't fazed. She tears up while leaving and makes her way to none other than, of course, poor Dan. The simp lets her in and gives her even more attention. She tells him that she left Dr. Manhattan and that he doesn't care about anything or anyone. She is having a rough time and asks Dan to go out, taking advantage of the poor guy. They go out, and Dr. Manhattan is dressed in a suit getting ready for an interview. He tones himself down, and at the same time, the couple gets into a shady alley. Dr. Manhattan starts the interview, while the couple are surrounded. Dr. Manhattan denies any involvement in Afghanistan, while the couple prepare to fight. A reporter lists a bunch of people who died of cancer while the couple fight. Dr. Manhattan is shocked to learn about this, and they suggest that everyone around him dies of cancer. He starts panicking as the fight continues, and he suddenly gets angry, making everyone vanish as the fight concludes. They walk out and then start to get awkward. Then Jupiter just leaves him after getting what she wants, and Dr. Manhattan leaves the studio. The comic book story continues with the kid. As stories come out that Dr. Manhattan causes cancer, Dr. Manhattan is all alone, looking at his past love that he gave cancer. When he's found by a guard, he decides to leave for Mars. The next day, the government investigates their place, and everyone panics as the Soviets are now fearless without the presence of Dr. Manhattan. The president readies a nuclear strike and calculates casualties. Rorschach wakes up Dan to give him the update, and is certain that no one is safe. Meanwhile, Dr. Manhattan is chilling on Mars. He is looking at an old picture of himself and his past love, and keeps replaying all events at the same time. Something weird is going on, and he finally moves on to look at the stars. As he watches, he remembers his past as a kid admiring watches when his father drops the news of Hiroshima. His father forces him to study atomic energy and abandons his craft. Dr. Manhattan continues watching and remembers graduating with a PhD in atomic physics. He starts work and is shown a test vault. He later goes to a bar and meets his past love, Janie. They quickly fall in love, and later her watch breaks, and he promises her to fix it. They later make love, and 3 years later, she leaves him. But back before his accident, he had fixed the watch but left it at the lab. He goes back there to get it when the vault shuts on him, and it goes off. The experiment goes off, and she runs off. It starts, and he gets ripped apart, atom by atom. They hold a funeral for him with nothing to bury. But later, he briefly materializes. He gets reborn bit by bit. He's skeleton and muscle and reassembles himself before finally materializing in his final form at the lab. She proposes to him, and later, he gives himself a symbol. Back to the proposal. Janie is scared of him. He's used as a weapon by the government and starts doing some immoral things. We continue to relive his life as he consoles Janie. He meets Kennedy, who gets shot, and Dr. Manhattan saw it. Everything is happening everywhere all at once. He lies to Janie and later gets with Jupiter. Janie leaves him, and years later she leaves him as well, but he continues anyway. Dr. Manhattan is tired of the human world. He is tired of being caught in people's mess, and he just leaves for Mars. Suddenly, he grows an entire world on Mars. He thinks about his life and how it could have been different. He gets philosophical as his building emerges, standing on the balcony in the end. Later on, Rorschach is torturing a guy somewhere. It's Moloch. He asks for more information. Rorschach theorizes that someone came up with a list of cancer patients and gave it to the media. Finally, he leaves him be and theorizes that someone used Moloch. But who? We return to this comic book kid as nuclear war nears us. We don't really know what the point of this story is, but the kid is into it. After that, Dan is eating with Jupiter, who complains she has no money or home. Of course, we know why she's with him as he pays for her food and offers her to stay at his place. This was your plan all along, Jupiter, wasn't it? The creepy sign guy is still near. Back to the comic and on to Ozzy. At Ozzy's place, he has an important meeting with a toy company. When he reaches the bottom floor, something is off. He talks to his secretary and says that death is an important step in rebuilding. Suddenly, a man pulls a gun and shoots the secretary before Ozzy stops him and beats him, before swallowing a pill to kill himself, but it's too late. It was a cyanide capsule. Back with Rorschach, he visits Moloch, but he's been shot. It looks like suicide, and then the police suddenly arrive. Bad timing. He's been framed and he walked right into it. He looks around for weapons and proceeds to torch the police and fights back across the house. On the upper floor, he takes them out before jumping out the window and landing on more cops, but they surround him and catch him. They unmask him, and it's the guy with the sign. We're back to the damn comic, but Dan has taken Jupiter back. What a simp. Ozzy is looking out the window, thinking about what is happening. The story is far from over. The world has turned on Dr. Manhattan, and we get a sneak peek of the next chapter. This was basically an exact copy of Zack Snyder's Watchmen movie, one that was so heavily criticized by fans. Everything is exactly the same. The plot, characters, and events. We still don't know how to feel about this movie as the story is not yet complete. There is still going to be a chapter 2 that will be released sometime in late 2024 or 2025. If it is going to focus on Rorschach, we're going to be very excited. Well, this brings us to the end of today's video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel to get more videos like this one. Your support helps us grow. And tell me what you think about this film. Did you think it was a good idea to keep the story exactly the same? Do you think this was better or worse than the movie? What do you think about Rorschach as a character? Let me know in the comments below. I read all of them. And if you're watching till now, thank you. I'll see you in another video soon.